that I can end all of this. I remember going through and crossing rivers in freezing weather. I remember one particular time just running and everything was after me. And just running and crossing rivers in freezing rain. Freezing weather rather. And coming out. And finally I remember one time I got to a highway and I put matches in a hat there and everything. And I lit up grass till I literally just burnt the shoes off my feet because it's so cold and so drugged up. And so I began to think about my life, and my brother came to get me. I think at the time I was in Detroit, and he came to get me, and I recall as he was taking me to Ohio that when we'd pass under the bridges and everything, I would hide down in the floorboard of the car because I figured that people would be on the bridges. They were trying to get me. They were after me. They were trying to get me and to see me, and they wouldn't see me in the car, and I'd hide. And of course, I went to a mental institution. You know what we tell folks like that? Jesus can't help you. Go to the nut house. Or if you get bad enough, they got a jail for you. The world does. Well, of course, I really wasn't thinking about Jesus. I thought I'd already knew about that. Folks that I saw couldn't even help themselves. How could they ever handle something like me? But I did. I went there. So hurty. I can't tell you, folks. I can't tell you what I see. In a little while, I know. I can come to anyone that when the Lord's grace is in my life, that I can't see some part of my life. And anybody, that hurting person can understand somebody else is hurting. That's hurting. And brother, I know it. And so, the Lord in His grace. I went to this. Everything is in my life. I began sharing and relating. I was told to just tell it all to this psychologist in this mental hospital. It's a veterans hospital. It's a mental part where they dealt with the psychology. And then I did. I told him intimate things that I have never related to anyone in my life. And as this went on for 6 months, at the end of 6 months, I came to a place there where finally, this is the day I get the answer. This is the day I sit across from a desk. And I have the answers to why I'm so different, to all the torment and all the bondage. I sit across the desk from this psychologist, and quite naturally I had leaned over because I put everything I had into it that 6 months, and I was wondering if I'd left anything out. And here's the way he started out to me, and he knew I was eager and anxious for the answers. And he said, Milt, when you first came here, and you started relating to some of the things to me about your personal life, I tell you what, I believed you was lying. I'm going to be honest with you, Milt. And I bothered to call and check in your part of the country with the things that you've been relating and sharing to me, and I found out they were true. I'm waiting for the answer. And I leaned over and he said, Milt, what you need is a religious experience. And I was thinking religious spirit. I was thinking God. And he said, but you can't have one. The only answer he was for me, and right then I couldn't have it. Because he said, you can't have faith. I was talking to the powers of darkness. But he spoke a curse on me because I received that in my heart. I received those words in my heart, and I believe that even God couldn't help me. And bad matters became worse. And then the hostility and everything that was there and had been there began to come out in a form of looking for bullies and things like that, and the people had always hurt other people with everything because I couldn't see the invisible powers of darkness behind all these circumstances that had involved my life. Quite naturally, bad matters became worse, and I was in another mental institution there for several months. I left there, my life continually got worse and more bondage. I even got to Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm telling you, when you become a robot and when you belong to the devil, you act like the devil. You're the image and likeness of him, and I want you to tell you that he had my life. He totally had my life, lock, stock, and barrel, and I was being destroyed by the minute. And in Atlanta, Georgia, I'll not go into detail, I couldn't even stay in Atlanta, Georgia because of the trouble and everything that I was in Atlanta, Georgia. And I left Atlanta, Georgia, and went to Blue Ridge, Georgia, and it was on a lake. And I remember I was spending some time by myself, and I walked through the woods. And I'm thinking about here for I was over 40 years old, and that I look back at my life, and I look at this world, and I say, you know, I didn't know anything about God, but I knew this world was phony as a $3 bill. I'm telling you what, I was sick and tired of these roles that I was playing that hang in there and keep a stiff upper lip and everything. And I started looking at the roles that this world all play. Everybody's playing a role. Everybody's acting. And everyone is playing. And you know, and everything, I thought, they've got to be some purpose. Something's made me. Someone has put me here. And I got to thinking, if all there is for me to live this life and then die, I'd been better off never to be born. They've got to be some kind of purpose in my life. Immediately I think of God, and when I think of God, I'd think about the people in church. And I'm the Lord, I just got my mind past them long enough to say, God. And I've never asked anything more serious in my life. I said, God, if you're real, please show me. And as ignorant as I was, the only thing I knew to do is just look for a tree to move or a light to flash. That's the only thing I knew. And I know I looked, and I didn't want to miss it. I was alone. There was no one watching me. And I wanted to make sure I didn't miss that light or the tree move or something like that, because that's what the way I was looking for it. But I called on God. I'd been involved already in 2 broken marriages. I crippled everything I ever got around. Why not? I was crippled. And then a girl that I'd met years before, my wife Joyce. Joyce and I came together, and I know that the Lord was in this. But you know, I wanted to talk. I wasn't around anybody who could talk to God, about God about. But you know, I knew she taught Sunday school. Of course, at the time I didn't know she's a lost Sunday school teacher. But anyway, I could talk to her, and I remember that when I'd start talking to her about the Lord, things would just stir up in me, and I couldn't stand it. I just had to, and people today don't understand that someone begins talking about the Lord and everything, what stirs them up that they got to go and they just can't stand it. See, I was so demonized. I was so under the control of powers of darkness, and just a little bit I was seeking with all that I could right there. Not understanding, but I always believed that there's some kind of invisible force that was destroying my life. And I didn't understand anything about it. I didn't understand about God. And my mind was just gone, practically. We married, and shortly after we married, I had a heart attack. I was taken to the hospital in a short time. I had open heart. They prepared me for open heart surgery. But they said I was like sitting on a powder keg. This was when open heart surgery was new. And as I found out later, mostly from the nurse and some of the things from the doctor, that I had been on the heart and lung machine longer than anyone had ever survived it in that hospital. The surgeon finally come out to my wife right there and just leaned up against the wall. He's so weary because he couldn't sew into my arteries. I had the arteries of over a 90-year-old man from that being the alcohol and the drugs and the destruction and everything that the powers of darkness had put me through and to my body. They left me on the operating table. Later they moved me into coronary care, and my heart stopped 2 different times. And they called this code where they shocked the heart back, and they shocked it back. I stayed there just a few days, and they sent me home. Doctors, they didn't complete the surgery, and part of the surgery didn't complete, wasn't even working. And I went home a dying man. And I'll tell you something else that happened in my life. I had the fear of God in my heart. I knew there was a God. I want you to know that I knew there was a hell. And I'd lay there at night, and I'd watch my wife go to sleep. I'd know I'd just like something you'd taken tying a knot, and I'd say, this is the night I go to hell. And you know, as I faced that situation right there, each one of you have faced that situation sometime. And I looked at that, I couldn't go to sleep. And I would fight sleep because I had life. You can't know, I couldn't tell you.